Do the Marlins have a closer problem? Tanner Scott continues to struggle in spring. However, Max Meyer, looking the business. However, does he actually profile as a reliever? Also, well, Luzardo, is it a concern? The velo was down. The home runs were up. I was waxing lyrical about this Marlins pitching, but all of a sudden, Luzardo in trouble in a game. Is it a concern for this rotation and for Luzardo specifically for opening day? Hope not. This is Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to Locked On Marlins. This is your daily Marlins podcast. I am your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up at Miami Marlins _UK. If you are listening to the pod, firstly, hello and greetings. And secondly, make sure you hit subscribe and left a review. 5 stars, why not? This is your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. There is a YouTube channel as well, guys. Hit subscribe over on the YouTube channel as well. It is also called Locked On Marlins. And if you are watching, we have a rundown. Luzardo velo issues. Equally, there were home run issues for Jesus Luzardo. Tanner issues. Tanner Scott, after Skip Schumacher said, it's my fault. It's my fault. I'm going to get him in the games more. He's not found his groove. Tanner Scott, still not found his groove. Can he be trusted as the Marlins closer headed into the regular season? At this point, absolutely not. Good news. Still a few weeks away. And so there's time for Tanner Scott to iron out those issues and get back to 2023 form. Max Meyer, another impressive outing for him. However, right now, does he still profile as a reliever? And from a spring perspective, and I know a lot of people will not be happy with this, but the big boys, they've got to go, and the big boys have been slow. I'm talking about you, Luis Arias. I'm talking about you, Jake Berger. Big Marlins sticks that have been a little bit slow to get it rolling in spring, but there's still time as well. So tons to get into on today's episode. The Marlins aren't playing today, though, by the way. So this is your daily Marlins content. And this daily Marlins content is sponsored by Gametime. You can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. So, guys, it feels like spring in general has been dominated by the pitching, primarily because the Marlins have a lot of pitching, and we're watching closely the pitching. Clearly, we're having to monitor Braxton Garrett. We're having to monitor Sixto Sanchez, and of course, we're monitoring Ryan Weathers and his emergence, AJ Puck and his transition. So all eyes are on the pitching for the Marlins right now. And Max Meyer obviously mentioned as well, Trevor Rogers. Like, there's so much going on from a pitching standpoint. So it feels like these episodes have been like really heavily weighted to the pitching. But that's where the action is. And frankly, that's where the action is on the field too. Off the field. Boy, oh boy. Off the field. The Marlins offense, it's kind of sneakily terrible this spring. I know it doesn't matter because it's spring. But I think it's the worst offense in spring too. Maybe the Cardinals is a touch worse. I don't even know. But the Marlins offense and the offensive group, we can make excuses and say it's spring, but the problem is it's still the worst. There's still work to do. I actually have no statistical evidence to say this is the worst. That's just a gut feel from my perspective. Someone watching this will probably look it up and go, hey, the Marlins are 14th in runs scored in spring. No way they are, by the way. They keep having nil-nil games with the Yankees. But there's no apologies for this, guys, that we're talking about the pitching. It's the right area, and it's the strength of this club. It's absolutely the strength. So, with that preamble and that table setter, let's talk about Jesus Luzardo, because, man, oh, man. I put a tweet out there saying this group of pitchers, it was a long group. It was like scroll emoji type of territory. This group was combined for 31 2/3 innings, I think it was, with a 0 ERA. Jesus Luzardo was in that list. And my good friend from Nationals UK then texted me the other day and just said, hey, Pete, how's that ERA looking? I didn't even know what he was talking about, then realized the game had started and Luzardo had been touched. So, yeah, that was disappointing. But I must say, from Luzardo's perspective, what was disappointing was seemingly the back-to-back home runs. So he gave up 3 home runs in total. Let's have a look at this final line here for Luzardo. 3 2/3, 6 hits, 5 runs, 4 of them earned, 3 Ks, and 3 boom bars given up. His ERA moves to 4.15 off the back of that. And why we're all kind of flapping about this was the velo. The velo was down seemingly like 2.5 miles an hour on the fastball. That's a bad sign. Giving up booms and the pace is down. Red flag for me. Didn't see anything post-game reported around it, which is kind of weird too. I don't know if there was like no access from like the media perspective. I don't know if maybe the fish on first guys were just tucking into a couple of burritos. I don't know what was going on. Didn't see any feedback. No media, no skip saying, Luzardo's fine. What do you... And I mean, to be honest with you, this is a good thing. The last thing I want to hear is Luzardo is fine. He's day-to-day or whatever it is, to be honest, because I don't believe the Marlins anything they say. And their ability to diagnose any injury issues has been proven to be way off the mark. So, frankly, I'm glad we didn't get any prognosis. I did see Cal Seelaf today hopping on Twitter to talk about or answer someone's tweet saying Luzardo's going to be fine. Nothing to worry about here. So that gives me confidence. I think I also saw that Jesus Luzardo's velo kind of ticked up towards the back end of that 4th inning, maybe. So, like, maybe it was just a blip. Maybe he was trying something. Maybe he was just gassed. I don't know. Either way, it's hopeful, like, irrespective of the results. The main thing, clearly, for Jesus Luzardo and all of the guys is to stay healthy. Braxy's already missing. Sandy's already gone. We can't have Jesus Luzardo dropping down now as well. We can't. So let's keep everyone healthy. Let's keep it rolling. Luzardo thus far in spring, it's been fine. He was really nice in his first outing. His second outing, from memory, was like not quite as good. And then this third outing, less good. So, there's things for Luzardo to work on, but hopefully the health is okay. I want to talk about Tanner Scott shortly as well. I want to talk about Max Meyer. It doesn't feel like there's an opportunity in the rotation right now for Max Meyer, unless he forces his way in. But there's a few other guys that are forcing their way in. But Max Meyer, more generally, I want to talk about him in more detail, about his profile. And really, like, the Marlins took him where they took him in the draft with the known risks that probably he does profile as a reliever. And that seems to be what we're seeing here, most likely with Max Meyer. So talk about him in some more detail as well as Tanner Scott, and whether this closing job is potentially up for grabs here, and potentially who would step into that role. And also we need to talk about the offense and the lack of, to be honest with you, particularly some of the guys that we lean on that have started real slow. Before we do that, let's get into our first ad of the day. And it's a new ad. It's Amazon Fire, baby. We got Amazon on the ads. Let's absolutely roll. Guys, Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's the opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all of the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all the latest in the world of sports, March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. Yes, sir. They've got the cooking videos in there. You can check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. to see it. Love to see it. All right, guys, back here with me, Peter Pratt, on Locked On Marlins on Thursday, the 7th of March. No game for the Marlins today. Game off. So appreciate you making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day and your main Marlins content of the day. Jesus Luzardo's velocity's down. Kyle Seelaf saying nothing to worry about. No media reporting I've seen on that specifically. Let's assume everything's fine. There's that gif, right, where there's just fire around and just say everything's fine. Let's assume everything is fine with Jesus Luzardo. The Marlins can't lose another starter. He is your opening day star, and the Marlins desperately need him. Did see more generally across the league that there was a big pitcher extension. Bello for the Red Sox. Probably pronounced that wrong. Is it Bayo? Bayo? I don't know. Who cares? Anyway, that Red Sox dude. He signed an extension through his minor league years into his arbitration plus year one of free agency and a team option after that. Could be up to $75 million. The dude was like okay last year, but man, it just makes you realize just how good that Sandy Alcantara contract was. Boy, oh boy, Sandy. Sandy and the Marlins pulled a blinder there. We knew it. We knew it at the time. Great for Sandy as well. Sandy's got an opportunity at the back end of that to hit free agency if he wants. I say if he wants. I mean, the Marlins going to extend Sandy again? No way. Is Sandy going to see that contract out fully? Knowing the Marlins in the direction, probably no way should be the answer to that. Anyway, that is not a topic for today. Let's talk about Tanner Scott. The last episode that I did solo, Tanner Scott it was off the back of one of the worst outings maybe ever. Walked the bases juice and a guy in, didn't even get an out. I mean, can it get any worse? I don't think it can. I mean, 4 walks and then yanked. It can't get any worse. And it didn't get worse, to be fair, for Tanner Scott. He then comes out and gets 1 out. He gives up 3 hits, 3 runs, 1 of them earned. Not good. How many pitches did Tanner Scott go for? 16. 16 pitches, 9 of them strikes, ton of hits, an earned run, and 1 out. I guess that's progress. I guess it is. Tanner Scott's ERA for spring sitting at 72, dead on. 7.2. Boy, oh boy, 72 ERA. Just imagine if this was anyone else. Just imagine if this was Sixto Sanchez that was putting this up. Imagine the dialogue, the discourse that would be happening right now if Sixto Sanchez had a 72 ERA after 3 outings in spring. We'd actually be calling for him to retire. Like, we'd be saying, that's it for Sixto. He hasn't got it. He's cooked. He's done. It isn't Sixto Sanchez that has the 72 ERA. It's Tanner Scott as the Marlins closer. It's the best reliever in baseball, pretty much, from 2023. Tanner Scott has had a really slow start. These relievers are so volatile, aren't they? It's crazy. It's crazy with Tanner. Like, when's he going to find his groove? The good news is, guys, opening day is still a few weeks away. So Tanner Scott still has time. Still has time to get into the groove and find the groove. I'm not concerned. Are you concerned? I mean, I'm slightly concerned. Are you concerned? There's reason to be concerned because he's giving up contact. He's walking everyone. And nothing's gone right thus far for Tanner Scott. Can it get any worse? No. Can it get any better? It can only get better. But let's assume. No, let's not assume. No. I phrased that incorrectly. Let's play out that in 10 days' time, and we're 10 days away from opening day, that things haven't improved for Tanner Scott. What do the Marlins do? Like, how do the Marlins manage this situation? Because if, let's say, Tanner Scott's ERA is, 50 or something, and these kind of outings continue, let's say he's got 3 more outings and things don't improve, then how do you manage that? How can you walk into the year and then hand the ball to Tanner Scott in highlight? Someone tell me, because I don't track spring numbers closely for anyone, let alone the Marlins and historical ones either. Someone show me a spring like this where the guy then walked in as the team's closer ever in history. Like, is this a historic spring for Tanner Scott in the most unfortunate of ways, where your closer is performing as the worst pitcher in baseball seemingly through spring? I know, guys, it's only spring, so who cares? Who cares? That's the beautiful thing with spring is you can write everything off to it's spring. It's spring. We shouldn't get hung up on it. They're just warming up. It's warming up. Problem is, everyone else looks warm and Tanner Scott looks nearly deceased. He's that cold out there. Rigor mortis has set in on Tanner Scott. Boy, oh boy. Listen, he's in his final year of his deal with the Marlins. There's a lot of discourse around this one because the Marlins aren't going to extend him. They went to arbitration. Tanner Scott won, rightly so. The Marlins aren't going to extend him. It's going to be his final year, most likely, irrespective probably of how the Marlins perform this year. Like if a good deal comes up and Tanner Scott's pitching well, he'll probably be moved, even if the Marlins are in it, because that's just what the business model says. But either way, like this will be Tanner's last year. And, the Marlins are never going to extend a reliever, particularly one with no proven track record that Tanner Scott has. He's got he's had a career year last year. Can he do it again? Said it on last week's episode. Most likely, no. Does he step back? Yes. By how much? Probably a lot, to be honest. It's what history tells us. So the question is if Tanner Scott isn't closing games, who is? If AJ Puck's in the rotation, which I think he will be, who is closing games? It's going to be Andrew Nardi, isn't it? For me, if I was a fantasy player, and I am a fantasy, I'm playing a few leagues this year. If I'm in fantasy, I'm scooping up Andrew Nardi on the basis that Tanner Scott looks absolutely terrible. Terrible. And Nardi's next man up, to be honest. He's next man up in this pen. I'm interested to see about Anthony Bender. But equally, does this open up an opportunity or a need for Max Meyer? Max Meyer, so yesterday in yesterday's game, 2 innings, 2 hits, 1 run, and 1 strikeout for Max Meyer. He threw 37 pitches. The Marlins continue to build him up as a starter. He's in that bucket of guys. If everyone's healthy, gut feel is Max Meyer is not cracking the rotation to start the year. He's working his way back from TJ. He goes back down to AAA and just starts the year out there, and then he's ready to go, which makes sense. I wouldn't. I think another option, a legitimate one, particularly considering, what we've just talked about with Tanner Scott. They've moved Okert. Puck's out of the pen. You've got Brazaban that's, I don't know, I think he's hanging out with Gene Segura. I don't know what's going on Brazaban, visa issues. All of a sudden, like last year's pen in the unit, you're looking around going, where is everyone? Where is everyone? I'm looking around thinking, I think the Marlins are going to need some beef in this pen. I think they're going to need some leverage. And every time I look at Max Meyer, everything points to Max Meyer being a reliever. He was drafted as a starter, but he's like, relatively, his body, he doesn't look prototypical, let's say, as a starter. He's got a 2-pitch mix. If there's a club that can develop a 3rd pitch, it is the Marlins, no doubt about it. And he's working his way back. The signs were that he was trying to build the changeup into his game or something else to go with that slider and fastball. Not really sure how effective the fastball is, but it's fine because the slider plays. We know it's above average. But every time I look at Max Meyer, it just keeps nagging at me. It's nagging to say, I'm not sure that there's a long-term starter in there. I don't think when we look at Max Meyer when he was drafted that anyone really thought there was a viable long-term starter there. We'll see. I mean, I want him to be. My gut tells me that Max Meyer probably, he'll be given a go in the rotation. But I think Max Meyer could be a really sexy reliever, obviously, because that slider's so good. And I think the Marlins starting the year are going to need a sexy reliever like Max Meyer. And I think it's a perfect way to manage his innings because he needs his innings to be managed. You can build him up now. You can sprinkle in the odd 2-3 inning stint in the bullpen for him to keep him kind of ready. But equally, I think there's a really sneaky leverage arm in there. And frankly, the Marlins are going to need them. Okert's gone. Puck's gone from the rotation. Tanner Scott's wobbling. Is Nardi and who? Tony Bender, do you trust him? Maybe. But he's on his way back too. Plenty of question marks there over Tony Bender. So Brazaban's, like I said, he's still not with the club. He's behind. Really interesting one for this bullpen. It was a big strength of the club last year. It was Nails. I'm looking around and I'm thinking, if it was a strength last year, gut feel is it'll probably regress a bit. I'm nervous. Are you nervous about the pen? Let me know how you're feeling about this pen and this group. Like, they've taken some bits away. And they're gonna need to lean on the pen because everyone's innings are being managed galore. Like, it's a big part of this club, and I'm feeling a touch nervous. Let's do the final ad, and then we'll talk about the offense. I'm feeling a touch nervous about the offense too, to be completely honest. This episode is brought to you by good friends over at PrizePicks. Yes, sir. That's not what I meant to say. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers instead of betting thousands against other players, including pros and sharks. You pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Football season may be over, but the action on the floor is heating up. Whether it's tournament season or the fight for playoff home court, there's no shortage of high-stakes basketball moments this time of the year. Get in on the action with PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app, where you can turn your hoops knowledge into serious cash, and you can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks. With as little as 4 correct picks, you can turn $10 into $1,000 with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries today on PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. So all you have to do, and it's pretty simple, you got to download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. Reminder, download the app and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. PrizePicks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, guys, back here with me, Peter Pratt, on Thursday, the 7th of March. Luzardo, velo down. Is he okay? I think he is. Tanner Scott, performance, not good. Are the Marlins going to have to consider a different option at closer? If Sixto had a 72 ERA, what would the conversation be right now? Max Meyer, to me, impressive spring. But every time I look at him, I see a reliever in the future for Max Meyer. I'm really interested to see what he can do. He needs to get that third pitch going. He needs to get that changeup worked in there. If there's an organization that can make it happen, it is the Marlins, no doubt about it. We've seen it so many times. So let's talk about the offense because, man, the offense is sliding under the radar a touch, really, because we're all focused on the pitch and then putting up zeros all over the show. And there's a lot going on. The offense and the offensive group, generally, it feels like we kind of know where we're at. Feels like we know what's the starting 11, so to speak. Who's going to be on the bench? We know it. Skip Schumacher's out there. Vidal Brujan, he's making this roster. He didn't use those words, but he said that pretty much. Brujan's making the roster. Nick Gordon, he's making the roster. The catching group, we know the catching group. Like, we know what this roster is. Avisel Garcia is making this roster unless something changes. Like, unless they decide to move on or they sign a different free agent. Like, it feels like Avi's making this roster. So the group is the group. Called it out like a few days ago. Should we be concerned about Luis Arias? The dude put up yesterday another 0 for 3. His OPS through spring is 126. His average is 0.0. It starts with a 0, 63. Arias has had a slow start. It's only spring. We can just move on. It's just spring. It's fine. It is. Tim Anderson with an 0 for 3 day as well yesterday. Berger had 1 hit from 3 at-bats. Berger's hit him 188 thus far. He's kind of sliding under the radar, Berger, to be honest. Bell, 0 for 3 day as well yesterday. He's hitting 237. Avi Garcia, whoa, he had a hit. He's up to 118. Like, the Marlins offense this spring has not been good. The main guys have not been good. Not one of them. Jazz has been fine, to be fair. Jazz has been like, there's no home runs from Jazz, but it feels like, hit every other day. De La Cruz started hot. Jesus Sanchez has been fine. The outfield actually looking good. The rest of the team, really slow. Really slow. It's only spring, so who cares? But, it's a Marlins podcast. I feel obliged to let you know that the offensive group that we're going to rely on, that in many people's eyes has taken a step backwards because Jorge Soler no longer with the organization. And the Marlins' plan is for Jesus Sanchez and Brian De La Cruz to get better, and for the Marlins to have Bell and Berger for the full year. That's their plan. That's the strategy is the guys that are on the club are going to be here for longer and they're going to produce more. So they're going to make up for it. They've added Tim Anderson. And as I've already mentioned with Tim Anderson, there's two big question marks over Tim Anderson. One of which is about, can he play shortstop anymore? And if he can't, really, then that's going to be the end of it with Tim Anderson and the Marlins. If he can play shortstop, fine. It's then, can he deliver anything with the stick? Last year said no. His history says yes. Which Tim Anderson do we get? I don't know. I'm not here trying to slander the offense. I feel like the roster's done. It's been really interesting seeing some of these like fringe guys having really nice springs too. For sure, we saw a big 2-run bomb from Griffin Conine yesterday, which is nice to see. Great to see Conine. Like, we talked about him so many years, haven't we? Is he going to be protected in the Rule 5? No. Is anyone going to select him? No. Like, Griff's kind of been there. I think, just on Griffin Conine, by the way, we don't speak enough about Griffin Conine on this podcast. My predecessor, the OG of this podcast, would have been speaking about Griffin. Like, this would have been a Griffin Conine emergency podcast after that 2-run shot yesterday. No doubt about it. Like, Griff would have been on here probably with Aram. He probably would. And I haven't given him enough love. So let me give him some love here. Great to see. He's had a really nice spring thus far. The at-bats I've seen, I remember seeing the first game of the year. Doubles. Boom, boom. Love to see it. There's a really high probability that Griffin Conine makes his Marlins debut, I think, in 24. How that happens, there's a few ways that can happen. Clearly health. But the depth chart, corner outfield depth chart is not extremely deep. There's guys that the Marlins are playing around with that could maybe play in the outfield, i.e. they've got Nick Gordon out there, Bruhan, Edwards, Birdie. There's guys that they can put out there in the spots. But if you're looking for a power corner outfielder and you need that, and probably the Marlins do, and things get a bit wonky with like Jesus Sanchez this year or De La Cruz, Avi, like Griffin Conine is only like a couple of steps removed from making his Marlins debut. I think we're going to see it at some point this year. I don't know how, but I think we do. Going to wrap it up there, guys, on that bombshell. Griffin Conine emergency podcast 2-run bomb. Aram Leighton here reporting for you. Thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day, guys. We'll be back tomorrow on Friday as we look ahead or look back, I think, actually, on a Yuri Perez start for the Marlins on Friday. Look forward to that. I'll see you then.